Hello, here's Professor Christian Holter again, and today's topic is what are these GLP-1 type drugs that are on the market, like Ozempic or Mounjaro? What do they actually do? How do they work? There are quite a few of these on the market. For example, semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy, the newer one, tirzepatide, Mounjaro, Zepbound for weight loss and diabetes. That's a dual agonist. We'll talk about this one at a later stage. Then there's liraglutide, an older version, Victoza and Saxenda for weight loss. Dulaglutide, lixisenatide, quite an older one, and exenatide was actually the first one on the market by Duran. And it's pretty much now finished because the patent has run out. There are newer drugs on the market now. So what is GLP-1? Glucagon-like peptide 1 is actually a protein, a short protein, and peptide is a name for a short protein, so it's made in the body. It's a member of the incretin family of peptide hormones, and it's actually released in many areas in the body, and it plays a number of roles. So here's a little drawing of this peptide, and like every protein, it's made of amino acids, and you can see that it's not that big. It's not a huge protein. So here's a drawing of semaglutide, Wegovy or Ozempic, and you can see it's almost identical. And all what they did is they just took the human version of GLP-1 and they modified it a bit because the native peptide doesn't survive in the blood for very long, only some minutes. So they changed it to make sure it stays in the blood much, much longer, because if you treat diabetes, then you need to have the drug in the body for a very long time. So the first thing they did was change the second amino acid at the top, and that means that this peptide is not being broken down by enzymes in the body, so it will survive much longer. In addition, there's a fatty acid that has been attached, and the reason is that with this fatty acid, this drug will attach itself to proteins in the blood. So this way it doesn't get removed via the kidneys and stay in the blood for much, much longer. So what does GLP-1 do then? How does it actually work? Well, it works via activating receptors. There's some cells in the body that express the receptors, and that's where GLP-1 can act on. So here's a drawing of how this looks like in the cell. So you have a cell membrane, that's this green sausage thing, and the receptor is inserted in the membrane. So there's a part that's on the outside, that's the top. So GLP-1 comes along and attaches itself to the receptor, activates it, and then sends a signal to the inside of the cell. You can see there are all kinds of signaling pathways being activated, and they have different jobs about energy utilization, glucose uptake, what to do with it, then cell repair, cell survival, and regeneration, and lots of other jobs that we will talk about. Then there can be quite specialized jobs, like on the left you see the vesicles, they're being released to the outside of the cell, and these vesicles, for example, could contain insulin, like in the pancreas. So that's how more insulin is released, and that's why it works in treating diabetes. So yes, so there are actually quite a wide range of effects of GLP-1, which may be surprising but the reason is that it just activates different cells and different organs. I've mentioned pancreas, increasing the release of insulin. And when scientists observed that, they thought, oh, well, maybe this is a good treatment for diabetes. We can increase the level of insulin in the blood. And sure enough, it worked. The rest is history, but there's a lot more to look at. Here's a little overview of all the things that GLP-1 can do in the body. So it's active in the brain. It's at the top there. We'll talk about this later. Then it's active in the kidney. It can improve kidney functions. Then in the stomach, food processing, stomach emptying and processing in the gut, moving food along the gut, taking up glucose and fatty acids from the food and more. Then it's effective in the lung and in the heart, very important. It improves heart function and blood vessels are relaxed, so blood pressure goes down, important element. In the liver, it's responsible for storage of fatty acid and glucose and other things. Then the immune system is regulated. And that's an important aspect that we'll talk about separately. So the muscle activity, glucose uptake, and lots of other elements, storage of glucagon in the muscle. Then adipose tissue, so adipose, those are the fat cells that store fat, and that's obviously affected by GLP-1. And even bone density, bone density is regulated by GLP-1. So just to summarize a few of the key drug effects that people are looking at, obviously insulin release in diabetes, but they're also looking at improvement in cardiovascular diseases. They have shown that these drugs can improve blood flow, blood pressure, heart function. Then they're looking in detail at the chronic inflammation response. And of course, we're looking at the brain. What does it do in the brain? They found that there are areas in the brain that control appetite. So this way you can reduce appetite, and that's why people lose weight. But other things as well, they notice that people who take these drugs, they smoke less, they drink less alcohol, they're not as interested in taking class A drugs. Then there are other areas in the brain that are related to mood changes and even schizophrenia. They have shown some improvements there as well, and there's research ongoing. And my research area, protecting neurons from stress in different types of diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And there is a lot of research going on, of course. So neuroprotective effects. So how come a diabetes drug is effective in protecting the brain? And one of the reasons is that GLP-1 acts like a growth factor in the brain. And growth factors are like hormones. They're signaling to cells that energy is available. After a meal, there's glucose, sugar, there's fat, everything is coming, and GLP-1 is released in the gut, telling the body, telling the brain, energy is coming, come and get it and make use of it and grow and live long and prosper. And this is important because in the brains of people with Alzheimer's, growth factor signaling has actually stalled. It's not functioning anymore. That means that neurons, they don't really use glucose as much. Energy utilization goes down, and that has a lot of after effects because neurons need a lot of energy. And if they don't have enough, all hell breaks loose, like synapses. Those are the connections between neurons. Very important. They stop working. They need a lot of energy for their job. They don't work anymore. They don't do their job, and eventually they disappear. Synapse loss is a key symptom of Alzheimer's disease. Then there's a chronic inflammation response in the brain that's always there in diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson. And we'll talk about this at some other time. That has a lot of negative effects on neurons. And if this keeps going, and if there are other stresses on top of this, then neurons will eventually give up and die. We can actually measure the uptake of glucose into the brain, into neurons. You can do brain scans with radio-labeled sugar molecules, and then you can measure how much of the signal can be seen in the brain. And here you can see the brain. It's like a slice taken through the brain by the scanner. And the orange parts show neurons that take up a lot of glucose. And in a normal brain, you will have a healthy uptake of glucose. But when Alzheimer's starts to develop, then there's some key areas that will stop taking up glucose. You can see there are not many orange areas found in the lower part of the brain. That's the rear of the brain, the parietal cortex. And that's a key area for developing Alzheimer's disease. So the receptors, when you activate GLP-1 receptors on neurons, one of the things they do, they will activate some machinery in the cell to take up more glucose. Transporters will be produced. More mitochondria will be produced that can process the glucose and create energy. This means there's more energy that can be used, for example, for cell repair, and reducing oxidative stress. Synapses can start to function again. They have energy again, and there'll be more synapses now evolving and developing. And the function of neurons will come back, like in Alzheimer's disease. Memory, attention, cognition is starting to come back. So we know that GLP-1 type drugs do that because we can measure that. And here's an example. Liraglutide, Victoza, was given in a pilot study to patients with Alzheimer's disease for 6 months. And another group received placebo, so no drug. So then these brain scans were taken to measure how much glucose is taken up. And here's an example of the results. So on the left side, you see the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease that didn't get the drug. They were just given a placebo. And over the course of 6 months, you can see that the glucose uptake has gone down. That's indicated by the red color. Then on the right side, you see that the glucose uptake has increased. And the green color shows that in some brain areas and key brain areas for Alzheimer's, glucose uptake has increased. So there are lots of other effects of GLP-1 in the brain. So for example, it can actually activate synapse directly. There are receptors there, can facilitate, increase the release of neurotransmitters and improve the function, similar as insulin release in the pancreas. Importantly, the receptors are also found on cells that are involved in the immune response in the brain, the microglia. They are part of the immune defense system in the brain, and they get activated in the inflammation response, which in the long run is not a good thing. They will cause oxidative stress and release a whole range of chemicals that over time can actually damage neurons. And we will talk about that at some other stage. But GLP-1 can reduce this inflammation response and reduce the release of all these chemicals and toxins and improve brain function. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and you can always find more information on my website or actual research papers. If you're a scientist, have a look at my ResearchGate website. You can download reviews or papers on specific research topics for free. And I hope to talk to you very soon.